Before I delve into what happened to me, I would just like to clarify that I've never been one to embrace conspiracies. I don't believe in ghosts, and I've never seen Bigfoot. I don't really expect anyone to believe what I'm about to say, but I assure you that I am not someone who needs to exaggerate or embellish my stories. I saw what I saw, and believe it or not, it is the truth. This took place about 2 years ago when I was still in school and living at home. My Uncle Pete had asked me to take care of his dog, Buddy, and watch his cabin while he was away. It was something I did for him from time to time. I had always loved staying there, and really enjoyed spending time with Buddy. I figured that this trip would be a nice break, a chance to unwind and put the stress of college on the back burner, at least for a few days. My uncle owns about 200 acres just south of Townsend County in northern Wisconsin. There are several buildings on the property, including a boathouse, a large garage, barn, and 2 cabins. I always stayed in the main cabin as it was by far the nicest of the 2. It had electricity, running water, several bathrooms, and a fireplace for heat but not much else. There is no cable or internet, and the cell service is spotty at best. It was the perfect place to catch up on some reading and unplug from the chaos of city life. As soon as I got there, I made the rounds, checking that all the windows and doors were locked, that there was plenty of wood for the fire, and that Buddy had clean water. My uncle always had things ready for me, but I checked anyway. I then grabbed a flashlight and searched the corners of the rooms and under the beds for spiders. After all, the place was surrounded by forest, and you never know what you might find. Later that night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, a strange humming sound caught my attention. It seemed to be coming from somewhere beyond the tree line. It started as a gentle hum, moving back and forth slowly among the trees as if it might be searching for something. Then it faded away, and the night was quiet again. I listened for a while longer, wondering what it could have been. I finally gave up, dismissing it as the wind, or maybe just my imagination playing tricks on me. I awoke sometime later, not remembering having fallen asleep. The humming was back, first soft and distant, then suddenly much louder, almost menacing. I sat up and stared in the direction of the noise. It was getting louder, closer, until I could feel it vibrating through my bones. The sound had an unearthly quality. It felt almost tangible. There was an energy to it that I could feel in every cell of my body. I can't really explain what I experienced. I can't find the right words to describe it. Buddy felt it too. He was so frightened that he peed on the carpet and took shelter under the bed. This lasted only a minute or 2, but it shook me to the core. I remember that at one moment, there was that horrible noise, and the next, complete silence. I sat there on my bed for 20 minutes or so, unable to move. My ears buzzed, and the air felt electric. Buddy was still hiding and my heart ached imagining how afraid he must be. It was at least 5 more minutes before I was able to muster the nerve to peek at him. When he saw me, he crawled over, and I scooped him up. I held him close for a while and could feel his little heart pounding fast and hard. I was torn between the instinct to hide and the curiosity to investigate. Eventually, curiosity won out, and I slipped out of bed, tiptoed to the window, and peered out. What I saw sent chills down my spine, 3 bright orbs hovering just above the ground, pulsating with an otherworldly glow. Fear gripped me as I watched. I wanted to duck down out of sight but was unable to tear my eyes away from the spectacle. It was truly mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. Then, without warning, the lights combined into a purple blob which quickly expanded like a wave. The eerie illumination spread over the cabin and surrounding forest. It pulsed and vibrated as if alive. I am having trouble describing it, and I'm sure that I will never find the words. It really bothers me that I am unable to relate what I saw, at least not in any manner that would do it justice, and it drives me a little crazy. I often feel an overpowering need to relate what happened that night. Part of me is obsessed with telling my story, and another part, a deeper part, is trying to stop me, trying to muddle my words and confuse the facts. Sometimes when I get like this, when I go off on one of my rants, I feel like my brain is actually going to melt. Anyway, I wanted no part of whatever was happening outside, so I quickly closed the drapes and backed away from the window, but the light quickly found me. It overloaded my senses and I felt as if my brain was shutting down. It seemed as if time was moving slower, and it felt as though I was losing myself. My mind was fading. I blinked, trying to regain focus, but spots of gray and white obscured my vision. When I could finally see again, it was a world filled with shades of gray and deep black shadow. I took a few deep breaths and stroked Buddy's head. He was shaking and so was I. My eyesight slowly returned as I waited for the next nightmare. I remember praying, maybe for the first time in my life. I begged whatever God there may be to end this horror. That's when I heard the sound of squeaking floorboards. Someone or something was inside the cabin. It moved slowly and deliberately, as if savoring the moment. I wanted to run, but there was no place to go. I was trapped. Buddy was obviously spooked and bolted from the bed, disappearing from the room. I could do nothing to stop him. It may sound odd, but at that moment, I was far more afraid for that little dog than I was for myself. Images raced through my head, scenes of unimaginable horror. My body was drenched with sweat, and I felt the world slip away as the footsteps drew nearer and nearer. And then, everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying on a cold, metallic surface, surrounded by strange, incomprehensible machines. Panic surged through me as I realized I was no longer in the cabin, but trapped in what looked like a futuristic operating room or perhaps an alien torture chamber. I think that at that moment, I was more afraid than I had ever been in my life. It was an animal fear, raw and primal. There was a thick, unfamiliar scent in the air, metallic and sterile. Most of my clothing had been removed, my head hurt, and my body was slick with sweat. I struggled to move, but could not. It was as if I were floating in a cosmic void, helpless and alone. And then they appeared, beings unlike anything I had ever seen before, their elongated limbs and featureless faces sending a shiver down my spine. I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my words came out as nothing more than a pathetic whimper. They came closer, their movements graceful yet unnerving, as if they were studying me, analyzing every inch of my being. I wanted to resist, to fight back, but I knew deep down that it was useless. I was completely powerless, a rabbit among wolves. As they reached out toward me with cold, probing hands, I looked away, averting my eyes from whatever horrors were to come. That's when I noticed something quite odd. At the far side of the room was a shadow, unfamiliar at first, but as my eyes adjusted to the dark I could make out the silhouette of a man. This realization came about the time the aliens began probing in earnest. I remember thinking that they really knew what they were doing. I could tell they had done this before and was quite amazed at their skill. For a moment, I had forgotten the guy watching from the shadows, and I became somewhat less frightened, even a bit relaxed. The light in the room seemed to glow a bit softer, and the table a little warmer. I reasoned that they must have drugged me. Despite the wrongness of it all, I couldn't deny a sense of relief and even gratitude for the mercy shown. The drugs or whatever it was they had given, or done to me, really changed my perspective of the situation, and I began to relax. I was actually about to nod off when one of the creatures bent down to face me. I will never forget staring into those big black eyes. I know that I should have screamed in terror, but incredibly, I was not frightened. She spoke to me in a soft, reassuring voice, saying that her name was Linda and that they were not here to harm me. I asked her why they took me, what they were going to do to me, and she responded matter-of-factly that they needed to gather some of my eggs. She told me that I had agreed to this years ago and that this was not the first time we have met. I asked her what they wanted with my eggs, and she said it was kind of like a shopping trip, and they were out of eggs. And this was when things got stupid. I know this might sound a bit crazy, but it's the truth, and I know what I saw. The drugs or whatever they gave me were really working now. I was feeling much more calm at that point. I won't say that I liked being there, but I was beginning to hate it less. Linda reached out a spindly hand and retrieved a pack of smokes from the table. She tapped the pack against her palm several times before pulling out a Lucky and lit it up. She then cracked open what appeared to be a can of Schlitz and took a long drink. This was just too strange. I figured that I must be hallucinating. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a reddish light flare up a bit, then fade, just a small glow like a firefly. I then remembered the man in the corner, and turned my head to look at him. Whoever it was had also lit a cigarette. I watched him intently, trying to make out more detail. As he puffed on the cigarette, it would glow brighter, enabling me to make out some faint details. I was reasonably sure that it was a human or humanoid male sitting on what was likely a chair, his legs crossed, and he appeared to be wearing a suit. Beyond this was only shadow. Then I remembered Buddy. Where was he? What did they do with him? One of the other aliens, a male I think, seemed to read my mind. He took a few steps toward me and said that they had looked for my dog but that he had eluded them. His voice sounded high-pitched and quite comical to me. I laughed at him contemptuously and was very surprised at my reaction. Just 30 minutes ago, I was screaming for my life, and now I was mocking one of my captors. I am a nice person and would never normally treat someone so mean. I figured it must be a side effect of the drugs. I was beginning to regain some mobility, not much but enough that I was able to rotate my head and see more of the room. I counted 4 of the alien creatures. 2 were working on something far to my left. The one with the funny voice was acting very weird. It appeared that he was hiding from me. I could see him clearly, peeking at me from behind some alien equipment. It seemed as if he may have been avoiding me, pretending to be busy. Then there was Linda. She just stood there at the far end of my table, smoking her cigarette and drinking her beer. Her eyes never seemed to leave me, and it was starting to creep me out. The room itself was bathed in the same violet glow that had filled the forest. A purplish fog rose up from the floor. Just above me was a very large group of tiles which glowed with geometric shapes. As I mentioned, my mind was a little bit off at this point, and my memory is suspect. The strange machines, which I swear were there only moments ago, were now gone, and then there was that guy in the shadows. How strange he was. He seemed so out of place, as if he was an alien among aliens, and yet I had a vague feeling that I had seen him before. I might have been tripping balls, or perhaps I had lost my mind, but the next thing I remember was someone kicking in a door or something. I heard a loud crack. It sounded like a wooden door being shattered. I realize this makes little to no sense given the fact that we were probably on a spaceship, but anyway. The next thing I recall was a shotgun being racked, and then Buddy stepped into view. He was standing on his rear legs, holding a Mossberg in his paws. He said something about chewing bubble gum, and then all hell broke loose as he went to work, turning 3 of my captors into what looked like picante sauce. Linda moved quickly, taking cover behind my table, and I saw the shadow man running for a door that I swear was not there previously. Though my memory is foggy, it seemed as if the room had changed somehow while I was distracted. I am not sure what happened next, it's all kind of a blur, but somehow, I found myself back in the cabin, slouched on the couch. I was fully clothed now, with Buddy nestled in my arms as though he was protecting, or at the very least, watching over me. I felt a bit drowsy and slightly disoriented as I cautiously surveyed my surroundings. I carefully scanned the room for any clues that I may have still been aboard the alien craft and that what I was seeing was merely a dream. At that moment, I didn't trust anything, not even my own eyes. That's when I noticed something peculiar. On the coffee table rested a vase brimming with roses, and I am positive that they were not there when I first arrived at the cabin. And strangest of all, right next to the vase was an ashtray, and it wasn't until I saw it that I noticed the unmistakable scent of cigarettes. Then it came to me, and I knew who that man in the shadows was. It was that rascal Pete, my crazy uncle. He must have set up the whole thing. He's such a goofball. We were always pulling pranks on each other. One year, I snuck one of those popping things into his cigarette, and we all had a good laugh. I thought, well, he really got me this time, but I'll get him back, someday.